Could the human mind be controlled? That was the question the United States government wanted answered. During the Cold War, the world was divided between two powerful nations, the United States and the Soviet Union. Both sides were fighting for military and technological superiority, but there was another battle happening in the shadows, a battle over information. Governments feared that enemy forces had discovered ways to manipulate people, extract secrets, and influence human behavior. And this fear led to a terrifying question. What if the human mind itself could become a weapon? What if a person's thoughts, memories, and actions could be altered without them even realizing it? To find the answer, the CIA created one of the most controversial secret programs in American history, a program known as MK-Ultra. In 1953, the Central Intelligence Agency officially launched MK-Ultra. The goal was to study whether human behavior could be influenced through different psychological and biological methods. The CIA wanted to understand techniques that could potentially be used during interrogations, intelligence operations, and psychological warfare. Researchers explored many different areas, including hypnosis, sensory deprivation, drugs, and other methods that could affect the human mind. One substance became especially important in their research: LSD. At the time, scientists were still learning about the effects of the drug. The CIA became interested in whether LSD could be used to weaken resistance, make people reveal information, or change a person's state of mind. But the methods used to explore these questions created one of the darkest parts of the program. Many people involved in MK-Ultra experiments did not know they were participating. One of the main problems with MK-Ultra was the lack of informed consent. Some individuals were given substances without being told what they were receiving. Researchers wanted to observe how people reacted when they did not know they were being studied. The idea was to see how the human mind responded under unexpected conditions. But in doing so, the program crossed a line that modern ethical standards consider unacceptable. The people involved were no longer simply volunteers in scientific research. They became test subjects. One of the most famous cases connected to MK-Ultra was the death of Frank Olson. Olson was a scientist who worked for the United States Army. In 1953, he attended a meeting where he was secretly given LSD without his knowledge. After the incident, Olson reportedly experienced severe psychological distress. Just days later, he died after falling from a hotel window in New York City. The official explanation at the time was that Olson had taken his own life. However, questions surrounding his death continued for decades. In later years, the government acknowledged that Olson had been given LSD without his consent, and his family received compensation. His story became one of the most well-known examples of the dangers and controversy surrounding MK-Ultra. But MK-Ultra was much larger than a single experiment. The program involved dozens of universities, hospitals, and research facilities. Researchers investigated whether memories could be altered, whether personalities could be changed, and whether people could be influenced through psychological techniques. The CIA also explored methods such as sensory deprivation, where individuals are isolated from normal sights, sounds, and experiences. The idea was to understand how the brain reacted when removed from its usual environment. At the time, the possibilities seemed almost unlimited, but the ethical boundaries were becoming increasingly unclear. For years, almost nobody outside the program knew MK-Ultra existed. The CIA kept the project hidden from the public. However, in the 1970s, investigations into government intelligence activities began revealing information about secret programs. MK-Ultra became one of the most shocking discoveries. The public learned that a government agency had been secretly experimenting with ways to influence the human mind. But discovering the full truth was difficult. In 1973, many MK-Ultra documents were destroyed, meaning the complete scale of the program may never be known. Thousands of surviving documents, however, confirmed that the program existed and that hundreds of experiments had taken place. Over time, MKUltra became surrounded by countless theories and rumors. Some claims about the program became exaggerated, suggesting abilities far beyond what the documented experiments showed. The reality is already disturbing enough. The CIA did not successfully create a perfect mind control machine. They did not unlock complete control over human thoughts, but they did attempt to discover whether such control was possible. And in that search, they violated the rights of many people. The story of MKUltra represents one of the darkest sides of human curiosity. The desire to understand the human mind has led to incredible discoveries in psychology and medicine. But when the search for knowledge ignores ethics, the results can become dangerous. MKUltra was not a story about scientists discovering the secrets of the brain. It was a story about what happens when curiosity goes too far. And it remains a reminder of one important question. Just because we can explore something, does that mean we should? When people think of the darkest experiments in history, they usually imagine something from a horror movie. But one of the most disturbing examples wasn't fiction. It happened during World War II, hidden behind the walls of a secret military facility in occupied China. A place where science was no longer being used to save lives, but to destroy them. This was Unit 731. In the 1930s, the Imperial Japanese Army created a secret research unit in Manchuria, China. It was led by a Japanese military doctor named Shiro Ishii. Officially, Unit 731 was presented as a facility focused on researching diseases and improving military medicine. But behind closed doors, its true purpose was much darker. The unit was created to study biological warfare, finding ways diseases could be used as weapons against enemies. The researchers wanted to understand how infections spread, how the human body reacted, and how these discoveries could be turned into military advantages. But instead of studying these things ethically, they used human beings as test subjects. The victims of Unit 731 included Chinese civilians, prisoners of war, and people captured by the Japanese military. Inside the facility, they were given a name that removed their humanity: Maruta. The word meant logs. By reducing people to objects, the researchers created a way to distance themselves from the suffering they were causing. This was not just a scientific failure, it was a failure of morality. The experiments conducted by Unit 731 focused on understanding the limits of the human body. Researchers studied diseases, infections, and the effects of extreme conditions. Their goal was not to protect people. Their goal was to create knowledge that could give their military an advantage. Science had become separated from compassion, and when knowledge is pursued without limits, it can become something dangerous. One of the most disturbing parts of Unit 731 is that many of the people involved were not uneducated criminals. They were doctors, scientists, highly trained professionals, people who had spent years learning how to understand and protect the human body. But when scientific ability is combined with a complete disregard for human life, it can create unimaginable consequences. As World War II came to an end in 1945, the existence of Unit 731 began to be revealed. Many members of the unit attempted to hide evidence of what had happened. However, information eventually reached Allied forces. What happened afterward remains one of the most controversial parts of the story. Some members of Unit 731 avoided prosecution after the war and provided information about their research in exchange for immunity. Many victims and their families never received the justice they believed they deserved. The story of Unit 731 is terrifying, not because it sounds impossible. It is terrifying because it happened. It shows one of the most dangerous sides of human curiosity. The desire to discover, understand, and advance can lead to incredible achievements. But without ethics, the same curiosity can become destructive. Unit 731 remains a reminder that knowledge itself is not good or evil. It depends on how humanity chooses to use it. What makes someone become cruel? Is it something that people are born with? Or could almost anyone change if they were placed in the right environment? In 1971, a group of researchers attempted to answer this question with one of the most famous and controversial psychology experiments ever conducted. They wanted to understand how power, authority, and social roles could affect human behavior. Their idea was simple: take ordinary people, give some of them power, take that power away from others, then observe what happens. But what happened inside a basement at Stanford University became a psychological experiment that would be debated for decades. The experiment was led by psychologist Philip Zimbardo at Stanford University in California. At the time, researchers were interested in understanding why people sometimes follow harmful orders and why certain environments can change the way people act. To study this, Zimbardo created a fake prison inside the basement of the university's psychology department. 24 male college students were selected to participate. They were considered mentally healthy and had no history of serious psychological problems. The students were randomly divided into two groups. Some became prisoners, others became guards. The experiment was planned to last 2 weeks, but it ended after only 6 days. At first, the experiment seemed like a simple role-playing exercise. Everyone knew the prison was fake. Everyone knew they were part of a study. But as time passed, the line between pretending and reality started to disappear. The guards were given uniforms, whistles, and authority over the prisoners. The prisoners were assigned numbers instead of being called by their names. Slowly, the environment began to feel more real. The people involved started identifying with their roles, and the behavior of some participants began to change. Some guards became increasingly strict and controlling. Some prisoners began showing signs of emotional distress. The experiment became so intense that people involved in the study questioned whether it should continue. After only 6 days, Zimbardo decided to end the experiment. The study that was supposed to last 2 weeks was stopped early. When the results were first released, the Stanford prison experiment shocked the world. The conclusion seemed terrifying. Normal people could become abusive when given power, and people could become powerless when placed in a situation where they had no control. The experiment became famous as an example of how strongly environments can influence human behavior. However, decades later, the Stanford prison experiment became heavily criticized. Researchers questioned whether the experiment was as realistic as it was originally presented. Some former participants claimed that the guards were encouraged to behave aggressively. Others argued that some participants may have acted according to what they believed researchers wanted to see. Because of these criticisms, many psychologists today debate how much the experiment truly proves about human nature. So, why does the Stanford prison experiment still matter? Because even with its controversies, it forces us to ask an uncomfortable question. How much of our behavior comes from who we truly are, and how much comes from the situation around us? The experiment may not prove that anyone can become a monster, but it does reveal something important about the human mind. Power can change people. Fear can change people. And sometimes, the darkest discoveries are not found in secret laboratories, but within ourselves.